Well, hello everybody. It's me, it's Joe, and I am about to start shooting the next episode of Same Name Different Game, which is part 3 of the Mega Man Anniversary and is a video on Marvel vs. Capcom. You Patreons will see this video before that episode comes out. Likely that everybody else will see it after that episode comes out. This is the first Patreon Q&A monthly channel update video that I am doing, and it's a part of the revamped Patreon. If you haven't checked out the Patreon page in a while and you were thinking about it, I've reduced the cost of early access to $1. It's now per video instead of per month. Partially because I felt obligated to get a certain number of videos done in a month, and now I don't really feel that way because people are paying by the video. So if a month goes by and I only get one thing done, then people only pay for one thing. If something gets really sideways and a month actually goes by where I make nothing, which hasn't happened in a couple of years now, believe it or not, then you wouldn't pay anything. So $1 a video will get you early access, and now $5 a video will get you the opportunity to ask a question, which I will answer here. And I'm also going to provide just some sort of state of the union, state of the channel stuff as well. So let's start with the Q&A. I've got it pulled up here. So the first question is from Tony, and she is a longtime supporter of the Patreon, of On the Stick, of our Extra Life campaigns, all that stuff. So she asks, what's the best deal you've ever gotten buying old games? And I think this is kind of a two-part question. There's what's the best deal you've ever gotten that was a great deal at the time? And then I think there's, what's the best deal you've gotten in terms of maybe I paid closer to market value and that market value has now gone up quite a bit. So to the first one, in terms of the best deal I got at the time, I went to a rummage sale several years ago and I bought the guy had a PlayStation. He was trying to sell everything, his PS1 lot, and I think it was marked for $20 and I offered him 15 and he took it. And it wasn't the PS1, because by then PS1s were super cheap anyways, but I didn't actually have a real PS1. Not that I get a lot of use out of it, because I have a PS2 and a PS3, so the PS1 itself is actually just sort of in a cabinet somewhere, not getting use. But there was a bunch of games in there, a few sports games, like there was, I think, Madden 2000, which was one of the last PS1, Madden games, and there was one of the Micro Machines PlayStation games. But there were complete copies in good condition of Parappa the Rappa and Jammer Lammy, and this was, I think, before either of them were on PlayStation Network. So at that time, both of those games were fetching, well over $15 a piece, and to get them along with the system was a really good deal in that moment. So that's probably the best deal I've ever gotten, at the time that I can think of. The best deal that I think I've gotten in terms of, and there's a lot of games that I bought when they weren't really worth much that then became worth a lot. And I do talk about that in some episodes, just because I really think that vintage game collecting is a bubble economy right now, I think. And I think that bubble is going to burst. And I think that you can sort of see that in the just totally out of control price increases in a lot of games. So I think it's one of two, and they're both games that I really love, and they're both horror themed games, interestingly. Probably the actual best deal I've gotten in terms of paying for close to market value for something and then it going way up is Splatterhouse 2. I got a complete copy well, box and manual. I don't know if there were any like card inserts or anything like that, you know, like mailers to send back to Namco, but box, manual, game cartridge, all in very good condition. Splatterhouse 2 for the Sega Genesis, and I paid $5 for that, and this was probably like 6 or 7 years ago. And in that time frame, that game is now, especially with the box and the manual, it's probably worth 20 times that. Yeah, so Splatterhouse 2 on eBay right now, there is a buy it now for $94.95 plus $3.49 shipping, and that's a boxed copy. Looks like it probably has the manual. That one and Demon's Crest is the other one. That one is not complete. That one is just a cartridge, but I paid, I think, $7 or $8 for that loose cartridge. And that was probably, that was even longer ago. That was when I first started collecting Super Nintendo games again. That was one I was on the lookout for. And I actually got both of those through a really great program that my old local retro shop in Milwaukee used to do, where you would just tell them the name of a game and they would take your name down, and when that game came in, when they scanned it into their computer system, they would call you and they would say, hey, you know, this is so-and-so. We got in a copy of Splatterhouse 2, you know, come on and we'll hold it for you for 2 days, come down and pick it up. Yeah, Demon's Crest might have been a better deal actually. $100, $125, or best offer, $113.49 free shipping. That might have been a better deal. Both of those were just really spectacular grabs. And again, not at the time, just because the market value has shifted so much. When I got Demon's Crest for $7 or $8, I remembered it because I'd rented it as a kid, and I've always been a big Capcom fan, as you all know. And I just remembered liking it, and I wanted to play it again. And I had no idea that it was all that rare. It is a later Super NES title. And that's sort of the story of a lot of my games. I actually just recently found out that Mega Turrican, which I have a copy of, is super expensive. And that, like, I picked up on a lark. I wasn't even looking for it. And I grabbed it for a few bucks. And someone told me that that one's up in the $70, $80 range. So there's a lot of those, and that is why I've started to, in a lot of the videos, encourage people to emulate for expensive games or use flashcards, because it's just such an expensive hobby now. Like, all these games behind me, you know, they're really mostly stuff that I grabbed at, well, I can tell you this, I have never paid 3 figures for a vintage game. So, I mean, even stuff like this one here, which doesn't have a manual, but it has a box. Like, I paid $80 for this guy. And that was that one has always been expensive, and now it's even more expensive. With the manual, it's probably I think it's in the $300 to $400 range now. Without the manual, it's in like the $200 range. And now we've got a few questions from Joel. Joel says, so he listed several questions and said that I didn't need to answer them all, which is good because there were a lot of them. So I'm not going to answer them all, but I will take a couple of them because, as Bugs Bunny has said, it's your nickel, Mac. So first he asks, I am aware you don't see yourself doing any RPGs anytime soon, but are there any games that could conceivably change your mind about this? And then he has a parenthetical. It says, I know it's a long shot, but please consider doing some of the older Final Fantasy games. So it's not that I am averse to doing RPGs in particular. I think what you're referring to is that there is a tier in the Patreon where you can request games, and that tier specifically says no RPGs. And the reason that it says no RPGs is because, well, mostly because I don't want someone to do that thinking that they really want me to review or compare, I guess. I don't really like the term review. I don't feel like what I do is reviewing games necessarily, but that they want me to cover or compare, you know, something like Final Fantasy V, for example, which I've never played. and would require me going through 3 different versions of a 50 to 100 hour long RPG. That is a huge time sink for me. These videos already take quite a bit of time, depending on the video. You know, like the Ninja Gaiden one and stuff like that, that took way longer than a normal episode. But, you know, a normal episode of Same Name Different Game, between playing the game, writing the script, shooting the stuff like I'm about to do as soon as I'm done with this Q&A video, and then editing, you know, depending on the episode, the number of individual titles that I'm covering and that kind of thing, you're talking anywhere from, you know, on the low end, probably 25 to 30 hours, and on the high end, 40 to 50 hours of work. And adding, you know, 50 hours worth of gameplay to any one of those, or, you know, that just, it's just, so on my own terms, there are actually a couple RPGs that I would like to cover. Final Fantasy IV is actually one of the ones that I would eventually like to get to, but we're just not there right now. And again, that's a game that I'm familiar with, so I don't want to say breeze through it, but I can get through it relatively quickly. So that's why the RPGs just are not really a thing. The first one you'll probably ever see me cover is one that I've wanted to do for a long time, and eventually I really do want to do Shadowrun for the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. That'll probably be the first one that I do. So you'll know the RPG gate is open when you see a Shadowrun episode. He also asks, since you started your channel, you've expanded to also having a spotlight on lesser known titles as well as console exclusives. Are there any other show ideas floating around in your head? So if you've been watching this channel for a long time, you know that I did a show, one episode, a pilot of a show called Perfect Scenes, which was a movie-based show, which did not really get the reception that I hoped it would. There is actually one other show idea that's been kicking around, which is basically, everybody does top 5 lists, and I hate them, but I am inextricably drawn to them. Like, I subscribe to Watch Mojo on YouTube, and that's the kind of thing that I usually put on while I'm working, because I don't want to dedicate actual time to watching something as kind of vapid as a Watch Mojo list, but they're really good background noise. But I don't like doing them, and that 5 Reasons was sort of meant to be like the anti-top 5 show. But I have considered doing a top 5 show if ever I want to expand the repertoire, but it would very specifically be like weird things. So it would never be like top 5 Genesis games, top 5 Saturn games, top 5 SNES games. It would be like the one that really had me thinking about it was like top 5 like 8-bit cityscape backgrounds in video games. And so it would be like Vice Project Doom and Ninja Gaiden 2, and like, you know, because I like, that's an aesthetic that I really like all of the late 80s, early 90s Night City aesthetic, and the way it's executed in Nintendo games and Master System games and stuff is something that I think is really cool. So that is the kind of thing I would do if I ever pulled the trigger on the top 5 show. But I also just really like the 3 shows that we do now, plus all the live streams, and really the 4 shows, right? Because as a live stream show, Eric and I do Genesis or Genesis Isn't pretty much every Wednesday, and then post them on the site when we're done, or on the YouTube channel when we're done. So there's a couple more from Joel. I'm going to try to go through these a little more quickly. He says, what's your stance on emulators with regard to doing your shows, i.e. using them to capture footage when your setup doesn't lead to the nicest video quality, games that are too damn expensive, or simply utterly unavailable, etc.? I've done it. If you watch the Master of Darkness episode is actually very interesting in a lot of ways that you would never know just from watching it. So first of all, it's interesting in that there are no stand-ups. There's none of this with myself or with Roger. When I made that episode, I was living with my parents. before I moved from Milwaukee to DC. And so I used an emulator, I used Kega Fusion to capture the footage for that episode, because my game collection was all boxed up because my lease was up at my home in Milwaukee. So I had to move back in with my parents while I was looking for a job here in DC. So, but I wanted to do a Halloween episode. So that one was all done with emulators. The Dynamite Cop episode of Obscural Games used an emulator because my video cables went on my Dreamcast, and I didn't have time to order and receive a new set to get the episode up before Christmas. It was a Christmas episode. Or to get the episode up before I went home for Christmas is really more accurate. So I just used an emulator. So I definitely do, and for arcade games, like I use MAME for pretty much any episode that has arcade footage in it, unless I specifically say, oh, I played it on this compilation disc. So like Crude Buster, Street Fighter 2, those I used compilation discs, but for most of the arcade stuff, I just use MAME, especially because it has a built-in video recorder. So I'm not opposed to it completely, but I really prefer to use original hardware because you're getting the most authentic. Like, emulators are not always accurate, so when and wherever possible, I prefer to use flash carts, and I'm actually expanding my flash cart collection. So I would rather use flash carts than emulators, given the choice. But I don't have a problem with emulators, and I don't have a problem with. I think people should use emulators to check out games that they just can't afford or don't have can't afford the hardware, can't afford the individual software. Is there any other possible Ninja Gaiden episodes you might want to do in the future? And then there's another question I'm just going to sort of roll that into, which is, are there titles that you find simply too widespread to cover on same name, different game? It's sort of the same question. So yes, there are other Ninja Gaiden-esque episodes I would like to do, but there's a reason why I did that one for the 50th episode, and there's a reason why there hasn't been another one. First of all, it's super long, right? And people don't always want to sit still for an hour-long video. You know, if I see that a channel I subscribe to has posted a 50-minute episode of a show that's usually 15 to 20 minutes, I'm excited, but I'm also kind of like, I need to make time to watch this. This is like a regular TV show at this point, in terms of the time investment. So I don't want to start making this. And also, it took a long time. Like, that episode was in production parallel to, like, Eric Grider and I finished the NBA Jam two-parter crossover that we did together. And I immediately after that started pre-production on the Ninja Gaiden episode. So there were 3 episodes of Same Name, Different Game that I made, and 3 episodes of other shows that I made at the same time as I was doing the Ninja Gaiden episode. And that just isn't feasible normally. And there are games that I would like to cover in that format at some point, but it's more likely that I will break them up or revisit games I've already... Like, I would really love to do a more comprehensive Ms. PacMan episode, but that episode, again, was already like, 20-some minutes long and had a ton of history stuff in it. Enough between the 2 NES versions. If I try to do all of the versions, because there are, a million versions of Ms. PacMan, right? It just becomes unwieldy. Like, there's been a handful of portable games that I've been wanting to revisit and plan to revisit at some point, where it's like, I want to do like Beavis and Butthead, Double Dragon, and revisit them with the portable versions. And I think that's more likely that I will cover. I would really like to go back to Strider at some point and talk about the actual arcade version and the Genesis version and the PC Engine version, and the new version, stuff like that. So it's more likely that they'd be split into multiple episodes and that I would do a big, massive tome. But yes, there are a lot of classic arcade games that I sort of haven't done just because it's very unwieldy to do them, because there's ports for a bunch of different computer formats, and then, you know, the Coleco, I don't have a ColecoVision, I don't have an Intellivision. And the last question is, what are some of your most and least favorite games? I'm gonna keep this one as short as I can. My favorite game of all time is Contra, for the NES version of Contra. And you probably noticed that I haven't covered Contra on this show, and there is a reason for that. Least favorite games, I don't hold on to that kind of stuff. It's really hard to say, like, it would have to be stuff that I've covered on this show, just because I don't really think about bad games that often. So when I rewatch old episodes or just look at the episodes I've done, I remember, like, oh yeah, that game is really bad. So something like, it's got to be something by Real Time Associates, because they were just, they still exist, weirdly, but they were one of the worst developers of the, 8 and 16-bit era. Probably like WWF Raw for the Game Gear is one of my least favorites. That was a Real Time Associates jam. Also, Captain America for the Super NES was also a Real Time Associates jam, and that's not only, like, that game isn't just bad, it's a game that was good that they made bad, which makes it even worse. Someone did the same thing to Pit Fighter, and I don't remember if that was Real Time Associates or not, but the Super NES version of Pit Fighter is garbage. I actually got it when I was a kid. I went to a friend's house, I had played the arcade machine and liked it. I played the Genesis version at a friend's house, but I didn't have a Genesis, so I traded in some games for the Super Nintendo version. And they were not done by the same developer, and the Super Nintendo version of Pit Fighter is spectacularly bad. So, just some quick channel update stuff. Like I said, I'm currently about to shoot the Marvel vs. Capcom episode as part of the Mega Man anniversary. There's going to be an Obscure Old Games episode later this month that is going to be another Mega Man anniversary episode. It's going to be an actual Mega Man game this time. So we kind of switched, right? Last month we did a real Mega Man game on Same Name Different Game, and just something Mega Man related on the Obscure Old Games side. This month, it's going to be something that is Mega Man related in Marvel vs. Capcom on the Same Name Different Game side, and on the Obscure Old Game side, it's going to be an actual Mega Man title. Won't ruin it for you, though. You'll have to tune in. Then next month is going to be Halloween stuff. The timing is really, really right for me to do a certain thing for Halloween this year for Same Name Different Game. We're going to tie something in, kind of, for Obscure Old Games, and I'm going to try to do 3 videos like I've been doing the last couple of years for Halloween, because I love doing Halloween stuff. So I'm going to try to do a 5 Reasons as well. I don't really have anything big coming up in October besides that, so I'm really hoping, and I'm planning on getting started on the Same Name Different Game. I think Same Name Different Game is going to be first this year, which is usually the opposite. I usually try to do Same Name Different Game last. But this year, because of the way the timing works out, Same Name Different Game is going to be first. Probably then 5 Reasons, and then Obscure Old Games will be like very close to Halloween. So, then in November, we're going to continue our pause on the Mega Man anniversary, because the actual Mega Man anniversary, the day, is in December. So the last 2 installments of the Mega Man anniversary are going to be in December. In November, we're going to do another, actually, anniversary of a pretty big franchise episode. An episode that has been, if you've been watching this show for this channel, I should say, for a long time, The November episode is going to be one that you have been promised for a long time, and I'm finally going to do it. So get ready for that. And yeah, that's basically the channel update. That's what's going on. Thanks for checking out the Q&A and the channel update, and check out everything else here. If you want to check out the Patreon, we'll put a thing here. You can go to the Patreon. $1 gets you early access to every episode of Obscure Old Games, Same Name, Different Game, and 5 Reasons, at least 48 hours of early access to all 3 of those shows. And $5 lets you ask a question here. You can ask me whatever you want, and I will answer you. And there are other things available, including, like I said, you can back at a certain level and do a viewer request, and I will cover any non-RPG that you want. So that's it. Thanks for the support. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you next month.